Here you have a Western European Jew, Herzl, and as you mentioned before, Rabbi Landis, the first wave is Russian, and now we have the first Zionist Congress, which is held not in Russia. Well, maybe it couldn't have been held in Russia, but it's held in Switzerland, in Basel. What's the significance of that Congress, the first one? Who attended it? What was its impact?
That's a great question. And when I was writing my book, I had a couple of different pieces in there about different Zionist congresses. And it's actually interesting that 9 of the 22 Zionist congresses that took place before 1948 took place in Basel. And I was like, why Basel of all places? And I think it really plays back to just that Swiss neutrality, that sort of Swiss culture, and that was the only place they could have it. In other words, he wanted it in Germany actually, but it was originally scheduled to be in Germany. But then they couldn't get a hall that would rent to the Jews, so to speak. So he went to Basel, and that's where it was held. And that's where, like I said, 9 out of the first 22 from 1897 until 1948, they were there in Basel. So almost half of them were there. And the conference was the Congress was conducted in German, not in Hebrew. It's always important to point that out. Hebrew is going to be much later on the Jewish on the discussion of Israel, and not in Yiddish. Not necessarily because he was opposed to Yiddish. That's going to, I think, the opposition to Yiddish will come a little bit later with David Ben Gurion and the labor Zionists. But like you said, he was a Western European Jew, and he felt that German was the language. At least those who spoke Yiddish kind of understand German, but German was the language it was spoken in. And there were 208 delegates at that Congress. Now, 69 of those 208 represented the different Zionist organizations. We had, like we said, a number of these Chovei Tzion organizations in the world, and the delegates were from 17 countries, and there were 26 press correspondents. Again, with Herzl being the just dynamic political strategist that he didn't only reach out to the Zionist organizations, but he reached out to politicians. Reached out to the press as well, because he knew that the more press that this conference got, the better the better the results would be, so to speak. And there are a number of things that were achieved at that Congress. First off, the Basel program was put together, what subsequently became known as the Basel proposal, which had a number of statements. It said that the first piece of it was that the Zionist Congress, or what became the Zionist organization, would support the development of the land of Israel through Jewish agriculturists, artisans, and business in Palestine. And the organization would bring together local and general events to that end, to try and support the development of Israel, or the land of Palestine, for a Jewish community. They would strengthen the Jewish feeling and national consciousness, and they would make the preparatory steps for obtaining the government approval, again, the government approval that was necessary for the Zionist purpose. Those were the 4 major pieces of the Basel program that was put forth at the first Zionist Congress, and that became the Zionist platform. And beyond that, there are a few other things that they achieved. They founded what we now call the WZO, the World Zionist Organization, which still exists and still meets. They adopted Hatikva as a national anthem, because that was already like the song of many of the Chovei Tzion organizations. And again, from a political perspective, they absorbed all these Chovei Tzion organizations under one banner. The idea of a people's bank, what became the Bank HaPoalim, was first established, or at least discussed, at the first Zionist Congress. They elected Herzl as the president, obviously. They elected a number of other of these strategic Zionist leaders, Max Nordau, who by far has the best mustache of all of world history. He was elected one of the vice presidents, and And the concept of JNF, of the Karen Kayem, the Jewish National Fund, was at least discussed at the first Zionist Congress. It wouldn't come into play until the fifth Zionist Congress in 1901, where they passed around Herzl's hat as the first blue pushka. But again, those are the major achievements from that first Congress. And then there would be many subsequent. As we mentioned, there'd be 22 before 1948. They would happen in the first few years. It was every year. Then it went to every other year. Had a hiatus during World War I, picked up after World War II, picked up until World War II, had a hiatus after World War II, obviously. And since the founding of the state in 1948, the World Zionist Organization continues to meet every 4 years with delegates, again, representing all pro-Zionist organizations in the world. And that started in Basel in 1896. And 1897, and Herzl kind of summed it up in his diary, a famous statement where he said, "Were I to sum up the Basel Congress in a word, which I shall guard against pronouncing publicly, it would be, at Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said it out loud today, I would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50, everyone will perceive it." So, it's interesting to point out that the secular Jew who had become the leader of such a movement, almost with prophetic words, said within 50 years we're going to have a Jewish state. And sure enough, 51 years later, there was a Jewish state. So that's what was achieved in that first Zionist Congress.